Children of the Black Goat. Chapter 6. The Archipelago of Drifting Souls. The ocean did not smell like the river. The river smelled of mud and memory, the ocean smelled of salt and eternity. For 2 days, the painted turtle had bobbed like a cork on the gray expanse of the Sea of Ghosts. The storm that had covered their escape was gone, replaced by a dense, clinging fog that refused to lift. It was a white void that swallowed sound and direction alike. Silas sat at the bow, his legs dangling over the side. The yellow sash was stained with salt spray, and his beard was stiff with brine. He was sharpening his sword, a rhythmic SKK that cut through the silence. "You're going to grind that blade down to a needle," Jory called out from the tiller. The boatman looked tired, his eyes rimmed with red, but his hands were steady. "A sharp needle pierces better than a dull knife," Silas muttered, inspecting the edge. Elin sat beside Silas. She wasn't looking at the water. She was looking at the fog. She had taken off her smoked glasses. Out here, with no sun and no staring crowds, her eyes could breathe. "The mist is thick," Elin whispered. "But it's not empty." "What do you see, little seer?" Mara asked, bringing them mugs of hot, watered-down rum. It was the only way to keep the chill out. "Shapes," Elin pointed into the white nothingness. "Big shapes. Sleeping giants." Silas sheathed his sword. He trusted the girl's eyes more than his own now. If she said there were giants, he prepared for giants. "Dead ahead," Jory shouted. A bell tolled. Gong, gong. It didn't come from a church tower. It came from the fog itself. Slowly the white curtain parted. Silas stood up, his jaw tightening. He had seen fortresses, castles, and citadels in his life. But he had never seen anything like this. The Isle of Mist was not an island of earth and rock. It was an island of wood and iron. It was a colossal graveyard of ships. Galleons, schooners, barges, and frigates, hundreds of them, had been dragged onto a jagged reef and fused together. They were piled atop one another, creating a chaotic mountain of hulls and masts. Ropes connected them like spiderwebs. Lanterns glowed from portholes that were now windows of makeshift houses. It was a city built from the wreckage of the world. "By the gods," Silas breathed. "It looks like a pile of driftwood waiting for a match." "It's the safest place in the world," Jory corrected, steering the painted turtle toward a floating dock made of wine barrels. "Because it doesn't exist on any royal map. To the king this is just a reef that eats ships. To us, it's home." As they drifted closer, the scale of the place became apparent. People were walking on bridges made of mast. Smoke rose from chimneys pipe welded into the sides of overturned hulls. Children ran along the riggings, fearless as monkeys. This was Driftwood, the capital of the outcasts. "Cover your eyes, Elin," Silas ordered quietly. "We are back among wolves. Different wolves maybe, but they still have teeth." Elin put her glasses back on. She pulled her hood up. "Are they bad people?" she asked. "They are people who didn't fit," Silas said. "Like us. But that doesn't make them friends." The dock was bustling. Men and women of every race and creed moved crates, mended nets, or argued over the price of salvage. There were no uniforms here. No red cloaks. No silver armor. Just a motley collection of rags, leather, and stolen finery. Jory tied off the barge. Almost immediately, 3 men approached. They didn't look like guards. They looked like pirates. They wore mismatched armor, a breastplate here, a greave there, and carried weapons that ranged from cutlasses to whaling harpoons. The leader was a woman. She was tall, skin dark as polished ebony, her hair shaved on one side to reveal a tattoo of a compass rose. She chewed on a stick of licorice root, eyeing the newcomers with bored indifference. "Docking fee," the woman said. Her voice was like gravel in a silk bag. 3 crates of dry goods or 1 crate of wet. Or we cut your rope and let the tide take you." "Good to see you too, Cora," Jory grinned, stepping onto the dock with his arms wide. The woman blinked. She stopped chewing. "Jory? Jory the eel?" A grin split her face. She punched Jory in the shoulder, hard enough to stagger him. "You old canal rat. I thought the church burned you in the delta." "They tried," Jory laughed, rubbing his arm. "But I'm fireproof. Cora, meet my passengers." He gestured to Silas and Elin. Cora's eyes shifted to Silas. The smile vanished. She assessed him instantly, the size, the way he stood, the placement of his hand near his hip. "Mercenary," she stated flatly. "We don't like hired swords here. They tend to bring laws with them." "I bring nothing but an appetite and coin," Silas said, keeping his voice neutral. "And the girl?" Cora looked at Elin. "She's small. And she's hiding her face." "What is she?" A princess you kidnapped for ransom? My daughter? Silas lied, the words coming easier this time. She has weak eyes. The sun hurts her. Cora stared at Elin for a long moment. Then she crouched down eye level with the child. Is that true, little one? Is this big ugly brute your father? Silas tensed. He prepared for Elin to say something strange, something about wheat or shadows. Elin adjusted her glasses. He is ugly, Elin said, her voice serious. But he catches good fish. Cora burst out laughing. It was a loud, raucous sound that made the seagulls scatter. She has spirit. I like her. Cora stood up. All right. Jory's friends are guests, not customers. No docking fee. But... She pointed a finger at Silas. The wreckage lord will want to see you. Newcomers with swords always make him nervous. Go up to the Leviathan. Top of the stack. She pointed to the highest point of the island, a massive, black warship hull that crowned the pile of wrecks like a fortress keep. Thanks, Cora, Jory said. Don't thank me yet. The Lord is in a foul mood. His rum shipment was intercepted by the Navy. They walked through the winding pathways of Driftwood. It was a sensory overload, but different from Ethelgard. Ethelgard smelled of perfume covering rot. Driftwood smelled of honest rot, seaweed, tar, and unwashed bodies, but underneath was the scent of freedom. Roasting fish, exotic spices from smuggled cargoes, and the sharp tang of cheap grog. Silas kept a hand on Elin's shoulder. Look, Elin whispered, pointing at a group of men playing dice on a crate. One of the men had no ears. Another had a brand on his cheek, the mark of a thief. They are marked, Silas explained softly. In the cities they would be in dungeons. Here they're just players. It feels loose, Elin said, struggling for the word. Like a belt that isn't tight. Chaos, Silas said. But organized chaos. They climbed ladders made of rope and stairs carved into the sides of hulls. The higher they went, the more wind they felt. Finally they reached the Leviathan. The ship was enormous, an ancient vessel of war that must have been a terror in its day. Now it was the throne room of the island. The deck was guarded by men with crossbows. They let Jory pass after a quick exchange of hand signals. Seated on the quarterdeck, on a chair made of whalebone and velvet cushions, was the wreckage lord. He was not what Silas expected. He wasn't a hulking pirate king. He was a scholar. A small, balding man with spectacles perched on his nose, reading a book. He wore a coat that was too big for him, covered in ink stains. A parrot sat on his shoulder, but it was stuffed, a taxidermy bird. Captain Moric, Jory bowed. The man didn't look up. He turned a page. Jory, you're late. The tide turned an hour ago. We ran into complications, Jory said. The church blockade. The church. Moric finally looked up. His eyes were intelligent, tired, and sharp as flint. He looked at Silas. And who is this mountain of violence you brought into my house? Silas, the mercenary, introduced himself. A traveler seeking refuge. Refuge is expensive, Moric said. We trade in secrets here, Silas. What is your secret? Why is a man with a military stance running from the military? Silas hesitated. He couldn't tell the truth. Not about the black goat. I deserted, Silas lied. I refused an order to burn a village. They didn't like my conscience. Moric studied him. He looked at the scars on Silas's hands. He looked at the protective way Silas stood in front of Elin. A conscience, Moric mused. A rare and dangerous disease. Usually fatal. He stood up and walked over to Elin. And you? Do you have a conscience too, little one? Elin looked at the stuffed parrot. Your bird is dead, she said. Moric blinked. Yes, it is. Why do you keep it? Because, Moric smiled sadly, it reminds me of a time when things were colorful. Now everything is gray. It's not gray, Elin said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her mirror shard. She held it up. She caught a stray beam of sunlight piercing the fog and reflected it onto the parrot's feathers. Suddenly, the dull, dusty feathers flared with iridescent green and scarlet. For a second, the bird looked alive. See, Elin said. It just needed light. Moric stared at the bird. Then he stared at the mirror shard. Then at Elin. He let out a long, slow breath. You have a good eye, child. Most people see the dust. You see the color underneath. He turned back to Silas. The law of the land says deserters should be hanged, Moric said. The law of the church says heretics should be burned. He walked back to his chair and sat down. But here the only law is the law of the wreck. When a ship breaks, we don't ask why it broke. We ask what can be saved. He waved a hand at the sprawling city of ships below them. Look at this place. It is built of broken things. Failed voyages. Sunk dreams. But we took the pieces and we made a home. He looked Silas in the eye. You are broken, soldier. I can see the cracks in your soul from here. And the girl, she is cracked too. But broken pieces fit together here. You will let us stay? Silas asked, surprised by the man's philosophy. You can stay, Moric nodded. But you must work. We have no free passengers. You have a sword. We have a problem with sea drakes nesting in the lower caves. Clear them out and you earn your keep. Done, Silas said immediately. And the girl, Moric added. She can help in the galley. Or, he looked at her curiosity. She can help sort the salvage. We find many strange things in the wrecks. We need sharp eyes. She has the sharpest, Silas agreed. Moric opened his book again. Welcome to Driftwood, Silas. Try not to die. It's bad for morale. That evening they were given a hammock space in the hull of a converted frigate. It was crowded, noisy, and smelled of unwashed bodies, but it was warm. Silas sat on a barrel, polishing his sword. Elin was playing with a piece of blue sea glass she had found. Uncle, she asked. Oh, is this home now? Silas looked around. He saw thieves sharing bread. He saw murderers singing songs to their children. He saw a community built not on blood or faith, but on the shared understanding of being unwanted. No, Silas said. Home is where you don't have to hide. He looked at Elin's glasses. She still had to hide her eyes. But this, Silas gestured to the ship. This is a good place to rest. I like Captain Moric, Elin said. He is sad, but he is fair. Fairness is a luxury, Elin, Silas said softly. The world out there, the church, the order, they follow laws. But laws aren't always fair. They define what is legal, not what is right. He pointed to the people around them. These people, society calls them criminals. Scum. But they took us in when the holy men tried to kill us. Remember that. Honor isn't found in a castle or a cathedral. Where is it found? It's found in how you treat the shipwrecked, Silas said. It's found in how you treat the broken. He sheathed his sword. Sleep now. Tomorrow we hunt sea drakes. And maybe we find out why the shadow broker sent us here. Elin curled up in the hammock. The gentle swaying of the ship lulled her. Outside, the fog thickened, hiding the isle from the world. A sanctuary of mist for the drifting souls. Silas watched the lantern light play on the wooden beams. He was still a fugitive. He was still hunted. But for tonight he was just a man in a city of shipwrecks, and he realized that he fit in perfectly. He was just another piece of wreckage trying to stay afloat. The belly of the island smelled of old salt, wet limestone, and things that had died in the dark. Silas descended the rope ladder, his boots finding purchase on the slick, algae-covered rocks. Above him, the noise of driftwood, the shouting, the hammering, the chaotic life, faded into a muffled hum. Below, there was only the rhythmic slap hiss of the tide surging into the subterranean caverns. Watch your step, big man, a voice called from below. Cora, the pirate woman with the compass tattoo, was already on the ground. She held a lantern that burned with a blue alchemical flame, cold light that didn't consume oxygen. She had volunteered to guide them, mostly to ensure Silas didn't bring the whole island down by hacking at support beams. I'm fine, Silas grunted, landing on the sandy floor of the cave. He reached up and helped Elin down. Elin looked around. The cave was vast, a natural cathedral of stalactites that dripped water like ticking clocks. The air was cold, but not the biting cold of the mountains. It was a heavy, humid chill. The sea drakes nest in the lower chambers, Cora said, checking the prime on her pistol, a heavy, brass-barreled weapon that looked more like a cannon than a gun. Nasty buggers. Fast. They spit a venom that blinds you before they eat you. Stay behind me, kid. Silas drew his sword. The steel gleamed in the blue lantern light. How many? Silas asked. Usually a pack. 4 or 5, Cora shrugged. Captain Moric wants them gone. They've been chewing through the hull of the Stark Reader, the ship that forms the foundation of the East Sector. If they chew through the keel, the whole district collapses into the sea. We clear them out, Silas said, his voice flat. Was a job. A transaction. Protection for labor. Wait, Elin whispered. She had taken off her glasses. In the darkness of the cave, her black eyes seemed to expand, drinking in the shadows. They are anxious, Elin said. They're hungry, Cora corrected. Predators are always anxious when they're hungry. No, Elin shook her head. She pointed deeper into the tunnel. It feels like a mother waiting for a storm. Silas paused. He looked at Elin. Her instincts had saved them in the storm. Keep your guard up, Silas told Cora. But don't fire unless I say so. Cora raised an eyebrow. You're the boss, mercenary. But if I get bitten, I'm shooting you first. They moved deeper. The tunnel narrowed, forcing them to walk single file. The sound of the sea grew louder, echoing off the walls. Scritch, scritch. The sound of claws on stone. Silas halted. He raised a fist. Ahead, the tunnel opened into a large grotto. A pool of seawater filled the center, fed by a submerged tunnel leading to the ocean. And on the rocks surrounding the pool they were waiting. Sea drakes. They were sleek, serpentine creatures, their scales shimmering with an oily iridescence, blue, green, and black. They had 4 legs ending in webbed claws and long eel-like tails. Their heads were narrow, aerodynamic, filled with needle teeth. There were 6 of them. They hissed as the lantern light hit them, flaring frills around their necks like cobras. Ugly bastards, Cora muttered, leveling her pistol. Wait, Silas said. He noticed something. The drakes weren't attacking. They were clustered around something in the back of the cave. A mound of seaweed and sand. They're guarding something, Silas said. One of the drakes, the largest, likely the alpha female, lunged forward. She didn't bite. She snapped her jaws in the air, a warning shot. She spat a glob of black venom that sizzled on the rock near Silas's foot. That's a warning, Silas said. They don't want to fight. They want us to leave. We can't leave, Cora said, her finger tightening on the trigger. They are destroying the Foundation. It's them or the city. She fired. Boom. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. The shot hit the alpha in the shoulder. It didn't penetrate the thick scales, but the impact knocked the beast back. The cave exploded into chaos. The drakes shrieked. They swarmed. Defensive circle. Silas roared. He grabbed Elin and shoved her behind a stalagmite. Stay down. 2 drakes lunged at Silas. He parried the first bite with his blade, the steel ringing against teeth. He kicked the second one in the chest, his heavy boot driving the breath out of it. Cora was fighting with a cutlass in one hand and her pistol, now a club, in the other. She moved with a pirate's grace, dodging venom spits and slashing at exposed bellies. There's too many, Cora yelled. They're fast. A drake flanked them. It scrambled up the wall, dropping down behind Silas, aiming for Elin. No. Silas turned, abandoning his defense to protect the girl. He swung his sword. A killing blow. Stop. Elin screamed. She didn't scream in fear. She screamed with authority. She jumped out from behind the rock. She threw her arms wide, standing between Silas's sword and the hissing drake. Don't hurt them. The drake froze. It was inches from her face. Its jaws were open, dripping venom. But it didn't strike. It looked into Elin's eyes. Those pitch-black, abyssal eyes. The cave went silent, save for the heavy breathing of the combatants. The vibration started. The hum. It wasn't the violent shaking of the bridge. It was a low, soothing resonance, like a cello played in a deep room. Elin wasn't pushing the drakes away. She was singing to them. Not with words but with the hum. The alpha female, the one Cora had shot, limped forward. She looked at Elin. Elin lowered her hands slowly. She reached into her pocket. She didn't pull out a weapon. She pulled out the bag of salt. They aren't eating the ship, Elin whispered, her voice echoing strangely in the silence. They are sharpening their claws. To break the shells. She pointed to the mound of seaweed. Nestled in the mound were eggs. Large translucent eggs. But they were covered in a thick, stony calcification, barnacles and mineral deposits from the cave. The water here is too hard, Elin said, tears streaming down her face. The eggs, they can't hatch. The shells are too thick. The mothers are trying to break them open, but they can't. Silas lowered his sword. He looked at the frantic scratches on the walls on the ship hull above. They weren't trying to destroy the city. They were trying to wear down their claws to sharpen them, desperate to free their dying young. They are trapped, Silas realized. Like us in the mine. Cora lowered her pistol. She looked at the eggs. If they don't hatch soon, Cora said, her voice losing its hardness, they'll suffocate. The salt, Elin said, holding up the bag. Salt softens the stone. Mr. Oren said so. She walked toward the nest. The drakes hissed, tensing. But the alpha let out a low chitter. She stepped aside. She sensed the intent. She sensed the deep water in the girl. Elin poured the salt over the calcified eggs. She rubbed it in with her bare hands. "Help me," she said to Silas. "We need water." Silas sheathed his sword. He grabbed a bucket lying in the corner, trash from the city above. He filled it from the pool. He poured water over the salted eggs. Elin scrubbed. Silas scrubbed. Even Cora, after a moment of hesitation, sheathed her cutlass and joined in, using a rough cloth to scrub the mineral deposits. The drakes watched. They didn't attack. They formed a circle around the humans, watching with reptilian intensity. Crack. One of the eggs splintered. A tiny snout poked out. Then a claw. A baby sea drake, no bigger than a cat, pulled itself free. It chirped. The alpha mother rushed forward, nuzzling the baby. She looked at Elin. She made a sound, a soft, clicking purr. One by one the eggs hatched. The tension in the cave evaporated, replaced by the wet, messy miracle of life. Silas sat back on his heels, his hands covered in salt and slime. He looked at Elin. She was laughing as a baby drake tried to climb her arm. "You realized," Silas said softly. "You saw what we didn't." "Fear makes you blind, uncle," Elin said, stroking the baby's scales. "You saw monsters. I saw mothers." Cora stood up, wiping her hands on her trousers. She looked at Silas, then at Elin. Her expression had changed. The suspicion was gone, replaced by a grudging awe. "We can't kill them," Cora said. "Not now." "But the ship," Silas said. "The Foundation." "There's a lower cave," Cora mused. "Deeper. Access is blocked by debris. If we clear it, they can move their nest there. Closer to the sea. Better water." "Then we clear it," Silas said. He picked up a discarded shovel from the corner. "I'm getting good at moving rocks." It took them 3 hours to clear the debris and open the lower passage. The drakes, understanding the intent, began to move their young. The alpha paused before Elin. She nudged Elin's hand with her cold, wet nose, then disappeared into the deep. The grotto was empty. They climbed back up the rope ladder, emerging into the cool night air of Driftwood. Captain Moric was waiting on the deck of the Leviathan. "Is it done?" Moric asked, looking at their dirty clothes. "Did you slay the beasts?" Silas looked at Cora. It was her city. Her laws. Cora stepped forward. "We solved the problem, Captain," Cora said smoothly. "The drakes are gone. They moved to deeper water. They won't trouble the hull again." "Moved?" Moric raised an eyebrow. "You persuaded them?" "Let's just say," Cora winked at Elin, "we had a good negotiator." Moric looked at Silas, then at the girl. He didn't ask further. He was a man who appreciated results, not details. "Good," Moric nodded. "You have earned your keep. You have a bed and food for as long as you need." He went back to his cabin. Silas, Elin, and Cora stood on the deck, looking out at the foggy sea. "You lied for us," Silas said to Cora. "I didn't lie," Cora shrugged. "I omitted the part where we played midwife to a bunch of lizards." She lit a cheroot, the flame illuminating her compass tattoo. "You aren't just a mercenary, Silas," she said, smoke curling from her lips. "And that girl isn't just a sick child. I don't know what you are running from, but you have friends here now." "Friends are dangerous," Silas said reflexively. "Maybe," Cora grinned. "But enemies are worse. And you have plenty of those." She ruffled Elin's hair. "Good eyes, kid. Keep them open." Cora walked away, whistling a sea shanty. Silas leaned on the railing. Elin stood beside him. "Uncle," she said. "Yeah. My hands smell like fish." Silas chuckled. He lifted her up, sitting her on the railing so she could see the moon. "Better fish than blood, Elin. Better fish than blood." He looked at his own hands. They were clean of violence today. He had drawn his sword, but he hadn't used it. He had saved a life instead of taking one. And deep down, the old soldier felt a crack in his armor healing. "Fear makes monsters," Silas whispered to the night wind, repeating the lesson he had learned in the dark. "But kindness makes miracles." 3 days had passed since the incident in the sea cave. Life on Driftwood had a rhythm like the tide. In the morning, the scavengers went out. In the afternoon, the markets opened. At night, the lanterns were lit and the stories began. Silas found himself settling into a strange, uneasy peace. He worked on the docks, lifting crates with a strength that earned him nods of respect from the pirates. Elin spent her days with Captain Moric in the belly of the Leviathan. Silas climbed the rope ladder to the captain's quarters. The sun was setting, painting the fog in shades of bruised purple and gold. He carried a basket of fresh bread and dried fruit, his payment for the day's labor. He entered the Leviathan. The captain's quarters were not just a cabin. They were a museum of lost things. The walls were lined with shelves built from the ribs of whales. Books, thousands of them water-stained and swollen with dampness, were crammed into every available space. Moric sat at a large desk map, wearing spectacles that magnified his eyes. Elin was sitting on the floor, surrounded by scrolls. She wasn't wearing her smoked glasses. Here, in the dim light of the oil lamps, she didn't need to hide. "Uncle." Elin looked up, her black eyes shining. "Did you know that the world used to be green everywhere? Before the ash winter?" "I've heard stories," Silas said, setting the basket down. "Stories don't fill bellies, Elin." "On the contrary," Moric said, not looking up from his map. "Stories are the only thing that fills the emptiness when the belly is full." "Welcome back, soldier." Silas walked over to the desk. Moric was studying a chart of the currents. "The girl has a sharp mind," Moric said. "She learned the alphabet in 2 days. She reads faster than my quartermaster." "She's clever," Silas agreed, looking at Elin with a mix of pride and worry. Knowledge was dangerous. "But what is she reading?" "History," Moric said. "Real history. Not the sanitized sermons the church feeds the populace." Moric stood up. He walked to a locked cabinet. He pulled a key from around his neck and opened it. Inside was a single book. It was bound in black leather that looked disturbingly like skin, but it wasn't grotesque. It was smooth, ancient, and embossed with a symbol, a tree with roots that wrapped around a skull. "The Codex of Roots," Moric whispered. "Banned by the church in the year of the torch. Possession of this is punishable by flaying." "Then why show it to us?" Silas asked, his hand drifting to his belt knife. "Because she needs to know what she is," Moric looked at Elin. "And you need to know what you are protecting." Moric placed the book on the table. He opened it. The pages were not paper. They were thin sheets of beaten silver, etched with acid. The illustrations were intricate, moving slightly in the flickering lamplight. "The church calls her kind the children of the black goat," Moric said. "They paint pictures of demons with horns and fire. But look here." He pointed to an etching. It depicted a figure, a woman with eyes like Elin's. She wasn't destroying a city. She was kneeling in a forest, and from her hands plants were growing. Vines, flowers, trees, exploding from her touch, wrapping around stone and steel. "The old tongue calls them Vitalists," Moric explained. "Or gardeners." They were not demons. They were the caretakers of the deep wilds. They channeled the energy of the earth, the void, to accelerate life. "To make things grow?" Silas frowned. "Then why does the church hunt them?" "Because," Elin whispered, reading the silver text with difficulty, her finger tracing the runes. "Because life unrestrained is chaos." Moric nodded. "Exactly. The church worships order, stasis, control. They build walls of white stone that never change. But the Vitalists? They represent the jungle that swallows the stone. They represent change. And empires hate change." Silas looked at the picture. He remembered the fox trap. He remembered the sea drakes. Elin hadn't used fire or lightning. She had used connection. She had spoken to the life inside them. "So she's not a bomb," Silas said. "She's a seed. A seed can break a boulder if given enough time." Moric closed the book. "But the church twisted the story. They turned the mother of the woods into the black goat of the woods. They turned a symbol of fertility into a symbol of gluttony." Elin looked at her hands. "So I'm not evil?" she asked, her voice trembling. Moric crouched down. "A storm isn't evil, child. A wolf isn't evil. They just are. You have power. Power is heavy. If you use it to grow thorns, you will hurt people. If you use it to grow fruit, you will feed them. The choice is yours, not the blood's." Silas felt a weight lift from his chest. For weeks, he had feared that he was harboring a monster. That eventually, Elin would wake up and devour him. But looking at her now, reading a book about ancient gardens, he realized the monster was the fear itself. "Thank you, Captain," Silas said. "Don't thank me," Moric sighed, rubbing his temples. "I'm telling you this because you need to leave." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The warmth evaporated. "Leave?" Silas narrowed his eyes. "We earned our keep. We cleared the drakes." "You did." Moric stood up and walked to the porthole, looking out at the foggy sea. "But Driftwood is a place for things that want to stay lost. You are being found." Moric picked up a spyglass from his desk and handed it to Silas. "Look, due east. Past the reef." Silas took the glass. He peered through the porthole. At first he saw only fog. But then he saw a light. It was a blue light. Cold. Piercing. It swept across the water like a lighthouse beam, but it was coming from a ship. A ship made of black iron sitting low in the water. It had no sails. It moved with a silent, mechanical hum. "The Iron Inquisition," Silas hissed. "I thought they were a myth." "They are the Church's deep-sea hunters," Moric said grimly. "They don't use wind. They use engines fueled by things better left unsaid. They have been circling the reef for 2 days. They are scanning for a magical signature." "Elin," Silas realized, when she healed the drakes. "The hum. The resonance," Moric nodded. "It was strong. It rang like a bell in the spirit world. They heard it." Elin shrank back against the bookshelf. I messed up again." "No," Silas put a hand on her head. "You saved a species. Never apologize for that." He turned to Moric. "If they attack, Driftwood will burn. Driftwood survives because we are hard to find, not because we are hard to kill," Moric admitted. "If the iron ship opens fire, my city of wood becomes a bonfire. I cannot let that happen to my people." "We'll leave," Silas said immediately. "Tonight." "Not on the Painted Turtle," Moric said. "That barge is too slow. The iron ship will catch you in an hour." He walked over to the map again. He traced a line with his finger. "There is another way. A dangerous way. But it leads to the open ocean beyond the Church's charts." "Tell me," Silas said. "The Boneyard Current," Moric pointed to a swirl of ink on the map. "It flows underneath the island. It's a subterranean river that exits on the far side of the archipelago. It's fast, dark, and full of sharp rocks. But the iron hunters can't fit their ship in there." "We need a boat," Silas said. "I have a cutter," Moric said. "The Needle. It's small, fast, and reinforced for impact. Take it. Consider it payment for saving the foundation of my city." Silas looked at the scholar pirate. "You're a good man, Moric." "For a pirate." "I'm a pragmatist, Silas. If you stay, we die. If you leave, we might live." And Moric looked at the stuffed parrot on his shoulder, which still shimmered faintly with the color Elin had awakened. It would be a shame to see the last gardener burn. An hour later they were at the lowest dock, hidden in the shadow of the Leviathan's hull. The Needle was a sleek, narrow craft, painted matte gray to blend with the fog. Jory and Mara were there to say goodbye. Mara hugged Elin tight. She pressed a small necklace into Elin's hand, a piece of coral shaped like a star. "For luck," Mara whispered. "And to remind you that even in the deepest water, there is light." Jory shook Silas's hand. The grip was firm, iron against iron. "May the wind be ever at your back, soldier," Jory said. "And if you ever find a place where the war stops, send a bird." "I will," Silas promised. They climbed into the Needle. Silas took the tiller. Elin sat in the prow, wrapping her floral shawl tight against the night chill. "Ready?" Silas asked. Elin put her smoked glasses back on. She looked at the dark tunnel mouth of the Boneyard Current. "Uncle," she said. "Yeah. I know what I am now." Silas paused. "What are you?" "I'm not a demon," Elin said, her voice steady. "And I'm not a battery. I'm a seed." She looked back at Silas. "And seeds are supposed to go into the dark places. That's how they grow." Silas smiled. It was a fierce, proud smile. "Then let's grow," he said. He cut the mooring rope. The current grabbed the Needle. The small boat shot forward, disappearing into the subterranean tunnel. Behind them, the blue searchlight of the Iron Inquisition swept over the empty dock where they had stood just moments before. The hunters had missed their prey. Ahead, in the pitch black of the underground river, Silas and Elin raced toward the unknown. The water roared around them, echoing off the walls like the applause of ghosts. Silas didn't know where the ocean would take them. He didn't know if they would find a sanctuary or just a watery grave. But for the first time he understood the mission. He wasn't just transporting a girl. He was carrying the possibility of a new world. A green world. And for that he would fight the whole damn ocean.